Oh, hello everybody and welcome to the monthly roundtable with WordLift on Kalicube Tuesdays. We are live. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Oz special. It's early evening for Nick, I believe, and early morning for me. Is that correct, Nick?
Aye. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. Absolutely delighted. Nick Ranger from Studio Hawk over there in Australia, David Riccitelli from WordLift, and you're in Tel Aviv in Israel, I believe, so halfway between us. Maybe not half,
Yeah. Closer to you.
between Nick and I. So welcome everybody. If you have any questions, please do pop them in the chat. If you want to watch this back, it's going to be on replay on YouTube and all the other channels. We're going to be talking about the building a knowledge graph from a SERP, which is incredibly interesting, and David's got an amazing tool to show us from WordLift that they've just developed. Once again, as with WordLift, always about semantic web and linked data. There isn't much choice with WordLift because that is your bag, isn't it, David?
Absolutely. We are not about technical SEO. We're about semantic SEO, which we believe it's the future. So you can ask us anything about it. And hopefully today we'll show you how to create the building blocks of semantic SEO by creating your own knowledge graph.
Brilliant. I'd like to point out that it's not just the future, it's the present, isn't it, Nick?
Indeed. I mean, this is pretty much the shift from keyword focus to now let's think about how semantically information is organized, and we can be able to present this in a really, really great actionable way. Brilliant.
Wonderful. I'm into all this stuff as well. So I think it's three people who are terribly enthusiastic about this and think that the semantic web is the present and the future. And probably it was the past if we're looking back to last year and the year before that. So welcome everybody. Quick presentation of who we are and who's doing this. This is the presentation of the monthly roundtable with WordLift. Every second Tuesday of the month we have the roundtable, and if we can show the animation, this monthly roundtable is presented with WordLift. And the animation is, there you go, it is happening. The Kalicube Tuesdays monthly roundtable, WordLift, semantic SEO, absolutely delightful. David is from WordLift. He is the Chief Technical Officer and a wonderful chap as well. And Kalicube, we have three solutions for your brand SERP. Beginner, we have the brand SERP book that just came out last month, and you can see behind me when the screen goes away. Intermediate, we have the brand SERP courses that I've just moved away from Teachable and onto our own dedicated platform. And for advanced, we have the SaaS platform, which is being updated every day and looks better and better every time I look at it. And Kalicube, it's all about your brand SERP. That is our motto. So on with the show. Thank you very much. That's the live presentation of the sponsor partnership, WordLift Kalicube. So David, can you present to us a little bit what you'll be talking about?
So no jingle today?
A quick hello and we're good to go. Welcome to the show, Nick and David.
Hey, it's just, I'm sorry, it's just not the same. It's like that wonderful way just to, like, as soon as that happens, the brain literally just switches a different gear. It's like, all right, we're into it.
I woke up earlier today fantasizing about the jingle. I have to say that.
It's a phenomenal.
Okay, well, I can't let you down, and you're right, Nick. Actually, as I sang it, I thought, yeah, the show started, and before I sang it, I was stammering. So yeah, brilliant, wonderful. The song is a necessary evil for us all. Off you go, David. What are we talking about today?
Yeah, so today I'm going to talk about how to create a knowledge graph from SERP in 3 easy steps. And I prepared a presentation, so maybe I will share my screen and present it.
Brilliant, wonderful. Right into the meat and potatoes. So David is going to share his screen, give a presentation, and then we have a demo. And then we'll discuss with Nick and David everything that we've seen. I'm really looking forward to the discussion because we had a quick chat the other day and it was brilliantly interesting. Off you go, David.
Cool. All right, so you already know, I'm David Riccitelli, co-founder and CTO of WordLift. And what you see down here, it's my ID in the semantic web, in linked data. So this is my unique address and identifier. That is, computer can actually parse this address and understand that that's me, okay? So first of all, what is a knowledge graph? Most of the people probably already know, but it's always good to remember that the knowledge graph is a representation of real world entities like people, organizations, places, events, and it's also their connection, how they are connected together. So for example, I am David, I'm a person, and I am the co-founder of WordLift, which is an organization which is headquartered in Rome, Italy. So this is a graph. I want to make a quick, real example here because you, Jason, and Andy and Bill talk about this in one of your Kalicube Tuesdays. How does Google know, for example, that Arnold Schwarzenegger is the Terminator? So this is the graph for Arnold Schwarzenegger. And you can see that the graph is connecting Arnold Schwarzenegger with the Terminator because he's starring in the movie. He's also starring in the movie True Lies. And you can see, we can also know that Arnold Schwarzenegger was born in Thal, which is located in Austria. And he's married to Maria, and they are affiliated with the two different parties in the United States. So this is just a very simple example of a graph and how Google can actually make sense of it by connecting entities together. But how did we get to knowledge graphs? How did we get to data? Well, this is the web, 1996, 26 million pages. Easy to find something. If it's there, it's easy to find it. Now look at this. This is the web. Not even today. This is the web almost 10 years ago. 30 trillion pages. It's starting to get complicated to find something. 5 years before that, Google stopped counting. Google actually stopped indexing the whole web. Google is not indexing the whole web. It's impossible. So you need to be aware of this. 1 year later, Tim Berners-Lee, that you probably know, he's the creator and the inventor of the web, told us you need to put data on the web, not web pages. You need to put data. Turns out that there is still a huge unlocked potential. And this is the father of the web. Because of him, we have our work in SEO.
Mm-hmm.
And it gave us a framework that we should follow to publish data on the web. It's called the 5 stars linked data. And the 5 stars are these rules that you need to follow from 1 to 5. The first thing is, of course, you need to put data on the web. The second thing, the data must be machine readable. It's not enough to put data for a human to interpret it. The data must be consumable by computers, by search engines, by machines. The third rule, the third star, is it must be not a proprietary format. So we must prefer formats like CSV instead of Excel, for example. And the fourth rule, the 4th star, is it must be an RDF standard. That is a format that can describe these entities, that can describe them as sentences. And if you use Semantic SEO, you already use JSON-LD, which is one of these standards. And the 5th star, which I think is the most important, it must be linked. It's not enough to say, I am David. Okay, but what David? And how is David connecting to the rest of the entities? So this is the most important thing. To every data that we put on the web, we must assign a unique and permanent address that it's stable, that can be referenced, that can be used to reference things, and can be used to be referenced by other things. So for example, my ID, as I showed in the beginning, can be used to reference myself to WordLift, which is another well-known entity because I'm co-founder, and WordLift is headquartered in Rome. Rome is another entity, and you probably know this entity from DBpedia and from GeoNames, which are other data sets. And why is that important? Because you are connecting, you're making sense of things, and because when you connect things, Google understands the exact reality of these things. He knows them. So 2 years later, schema.org is born. And what is schema.org? Schema.org is a vocabulary which has been created by Google, Bing, and Yahoo, and later on also Yandex joined. And it's a vocabulary that you use to define data, to define things. And this is from the original presentation in 2011 by schema.org. It's a slide. there is just this slide that says, what do you do with schema.org? You improve query results relevance. So now you start to understand how things are connecting together, right? That is, this vocabulary that's used to define data, it's used to improve the relevance for query results. And this is 2011. And these are two stickers that I took from the schema.org FAQ. And again, it's very important here to stress that search engines that see more of the markup they need, they will surface your content more prominently in search results. Okay, so we cannot turn our head around. Schema.org is fundamental to improve the ranking of our sites, of our pages. And this is just an example, schema.org. So probably you saw this if you use the validator. And this is how a machine will see your web page when you mark it up with the structured data. So here, for example, this is a web page of a product, and you can see, in fact, it's defined as a product. This is what I was saying before. This is a unique ID, which allows others to reference this product from their own knowledge graphs. This is a short description, the page where this product is published, the name, and so forth. Now, 1 year later, after the schema.org was created, Amit Singhal, the senior vice president of engineering at Google at the time, wrote a post. And this post is called Introducing the Knowledge Graph. Things, not strings. And I think this post is fundamental. So I have 2 or 3 slides from this post. The first one is that he said, take a query like Taj Mahal. For more than 4 decades, search has essentially been about matching keywords to queries. That is, for search engines, these were just words, no meaning at all. They're just words. But, Amit Singhal says, but we all know that Taj Mahal has much richer meaning. In fact, it can be the very famous monument, but it can be also a Grammy Award-winning musician or a now liquidated casino in Atlantic City. So these are actually not just words. In fact, Amit says, the knowledge graph is a critical first step towards building the next generation of search. So imagine that 10 years ago, Amit Singhal, senior vice president of engineering at Google, says that they are working on search to rely heavily on knowledge graph. And this is more or less how I see this, right? This is basically the golden island, and we are all looking at these keywords that are strings because we want to capture them, we want to make ours, we want to use them to shine in search. But this is the truth, this is the reality. That is just the tip of the iceberg. As Amit says, things, not strings. And deep in the water, we have entities that are supporting these keywords, and these are the things that actually Google is using more and more to understand how to rank websites and web pages. So this is fundamental. Now we understand how it's fundamental to create a knowledge graph for our website. Okay, but how do I create a knowledge graph? Well, use the WordLift add-on for Google Sheets. Now, this is not, of course, it's a simulation. Maybe in a couple of years, Google Home will say that for real. I don't know. Mm-hmm. So now we'll show a short demo. And in this short demo, we will see how we will create the knowledge graph in 3 easy steps. We will capture things from the SERP. We will import these things to our knowledge graph, and then we will connect a page that I created with the knowledge graph. Demo time. All right, I will now show you how to create the knowledge graph. So this is a post that I want to rank for. I have already an idea about the query strings that I want to rank for. Anyway, I can also use some suggestions from the Google Search Console. So let's see. I will create a new spreadsheet. This is just a blank new spreadsheet from Google Sheets. And I will open the WordLift add-on for Google Sheets. And there is this nice wizard here. And the first 2 steps are some configuration steps. So I have to configure it to connect it to my WordLift. So I will just use the same data that I have here. So the WordLift key. I want to target the United States and English language and the google.com domain. And yeah, I will connect to the Google Search Console so that the add-on can preload some data for me. And I want to use the configuration for WordLift.io just for the sake of this example. I will just get the last 30 days. I don't need the URLs at this stage. Cool. Now I could review here the query strings, but in this case I want to bring my own, because I already know that I want to rank for these queries. So I will select, I will just copy and paste them here, and I will select them. And then I move to the next step. I want to now get the analysis for the SERP. This may take a while. Cool. So these are the results from the SERP analysis. And I usually apply some filters here, but first I will show you what these are. So here we got the query that we put in the previous screen. Rank is the number, the position in SERP where we found the entity. These are the entity IDs, and they can come from the local knowledge graph as well, of course, from linked data like dbpedia.org or wikidata.org. We have a confidence score, how confident we are that this is the right entity on that page, the type of the entity, the label, and the list of same as. So now I'm going to apply some filters to choose the entities that I think are more relevant. So let's filter by a high score. And yeah, it looks really nice. Maybe I can lower a little bit the score. Yeah, cool. So these are the ones that I want for sure. I want the Wikipedia, Wikidata, Tim Berners-Lee, search. So we got two search here. So we got search engine technology, and search engine technology, of course, is the same. So I can just type one of the two. And SEO, sure. Prince Philip, no. Google, and I think this is enough. And now I will import them into my vocabulary. How cool is that? It's importing into WordPress automatically. I don't have to type anything. There we go. Complete. So now I will go back to my WordPress site. I can see that the entities have been successfully imported. And now I can go back here, open the WordLift sidebar, and I can mark them up. That's cool. Now I can update. Now I can open the post link, permalink, and I will go on the validator to check the structured data. So you can see this is the article structured data. Please notice that we also assign a permanent URI to any entity created with WordLift. Then this is a requirement to be compliant with the 5 stars requirement. And there we go. You can see that my article is mentioning the entities here. There is a preset description that I can update later on. And there are also the same as linking my entity with DBpedia, the Freebase, that is the Google knowledge graph, and Wikidata, and so forth. So these are the entities that I connected. Yeah, search engine technology, search engine optimization, and Tim Berners-Lee, of course. And I want to show you that I can also select here knowledge graph, and this will be copied from linked data into my vocabulary. And because knowledge graph is in the title of my post, if I reload here the structured data, I should see this new about property linking the knowledge graph entity. Cool.
Brilliant, wonderful. Sorry, that was it's so fascinating. I was looking at the screen, thinking about all the things you were saying. That's absolutely brilliant. Incredibly simple, because one of the problems I've always had is trying to figure out which entities I should be tagging. And this seems to provide a solution. What do you think, Nick?
I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head right there, because a lot of the time, people will want to choose 50, 100, 200 entities to be able to wrap up. Without really any good way of being able to have a process of filtration, and also just really hitting on that relevance as well. This is a really nice way to be able to take a lot of the guesswork out of it, and just kind of have something that is automated, that is drawn from an extraordinary database.
Right, brilliant. And what I love about it, David, is if you want to know what Google wants to see, ask Google. It's really simple and delightful.
Exactly.
And so what it does allow us to do, I mean, I've had clients using WordLift who have come in and put in 50 or 100 entities, and you're saying, well, that's totally pointless. And then somebody else comes in and puts in totally the wrong ones, and you're saying, well, that isn't actually the entities that are relevant to this page. David, I mean, from your perspective, part of the problem is our understanding of what an entity is and what are the important entities linked to the entity we're talking about. This is a solution.
Yeah. I think that part of the problem is that as content writers, sometimes it's hard for us to define the boundary of what our knowledge graph is. That is, we try to be as inclusive as possible, and sometimes it's too much, because the more entities we bring into our knowledge graph, the more we are making our surface large, and then the less Google understands what is our competence. So by speaking with our customers, one of the things we realize is that, and speaking with people like Nick, that we start, most of the time anyway, we start from queries, right? Because this is what we do on a daily basis. We search for things. So how we could actually, in a way, reverse engineer the entities and the concepts supporting queries by actually looking at what Google is providing as search results. So this is more or less the idea behind this approach, that we start with the queries that we want to target, to understand what are the concepts that support these queries, and then we can scroll and choose among these concepts, and then bring them into our knowledge graph. Of course, the knowledge graph is not born in a day. I mean, you start with something, and then it grows the more you use it. And then it's quite interesting to see also from the feedback that we received that it will help you tune your content later on. It is when you start writing future articles, because you will see how which entities are actually appearing in your content. It will help you write more coherent content, and so in a way define better your competence, so that Google can clearly understand what's your area of expertise.
Right. Correct. Gabor talks an awful lot about being an authority within your topicality, which I absolutely love. And I think it's incredibly important. And from my perspective, the clients I've had and Kalicube itself, we've had success when we do specialize and when we do focus. I mean, Nick, what's been your experience in terms of kind of entities when people are writing and sticking on topic? Very difficult to do as human beings.
Well, I think, there's generally, like I see like two kinds of approaches. One that is super granular and will want to write about absolutely everything. We kind of have to work back with essentially like topical dilution, because they're ranking for things. They've got traffic going to the sites for completely irrelevant queries that they're ranking well for, but it has absolutely nothing to do with what it's the core of the business is there. So this is kind of a way to like be able to strip some of this back. Whereas like on the other hand, we might have, and this is probably more often the case, that there is super thin content. It is kind of just there. All the sort of intent is around like informational query with just buy. This is like, sort of like deciding factors around the product, but essentially just after that, buy. And I think with those kinds of content, we need to be able to have a lot more of a refined way to be able to have content strategies that look at, okay, these are the intents that we're wanting to go after, but now let's look at the business as a whole. And instead of like going after this query, let's look at actually building something that is super sustainable, not just for the short term, but for the longer term. And when we think about this, the knowledge graph is an enormous database of information that enables Google to provide intimate and factual answers to those questions. So again, like where we're being able to like draw it all the way back and say like, okay, these are our understanding of like what we do as a business. This is all the content that's here. Now we've got a really, really brilliant way to be able to do this at scale, because we've got these wonderful things that go through. They learn through the content and be able to put a lot of different, a lot more understanding around these entities and attributes to be able to actually say like, well, these are the classes of information. This is what you're wanting to present. And from that, I've actually found that some of the things that it actually there goes in and presents, it starts to inform like, okay, well, I see a lot of continual patterns of things. Maybe like let's now start creating content around this, because it's super relevant to what we're doing, and we're finding more and more being dragged out of that database that is giving us a really, really good idea of like, yeah, we're hitting the nail on the head. We're getting that relevancy through this. So let's just keep going through, from these really, really interesting, like URI discoverers, like which usually consists of sequence of numbers and used by machines to identify that entity. So,
right.
we as humans
recognize
the entity.
Yeah, no, sorry. That just made me think kind of that whole thing is people saying, well, what should we write about next? And when you're going through the exercise that David just showed, you've got lots of ideas coming out all the time. And then you end up saying, when will I have time to write about all this incredibly interesting and relevant stuff? And David, one thing that struck me, really quickly, just first, Alessia asked, is it possible to use this plugin without having WordLift?
Yeah, it's possible. And so what I showed there, it's the integration with WordPress, which makes it easy to import the entities in the knowledge graph. But we're also going to provide a way to copy and paste the JSON and the structured data in any CMS. And the add-on is right now it's available in preview to our VIP customers. So if you want to use it in the preview, you can just contact us. Of course, Jason is super VIP customer, and but then we will also release it to the public, and it will be either bundled with the WordLift subscription or available separately.
Right, because I mean, so just watching the demonstration just made me realize that I have kind of people working with me, and one of the problems they have is identifying what are the entities, and the exercise you just showed can seem frustrating because you have to go through that part manually, but you've given the list and you're saying, okay, this is what the machine's understood. The machine isn't going to get it all right. Now you just go through and sort it out, and it forces us to think, what is the entity and what are we talking about? So I can see an incredible use for this, for them to go through, find what the entities are, but then also look at the content and saying, are we really saying what we think we're saying?
Correct. In fact, I think it's also so in the demo I gave, you can see also that we connect to the Google Search Console, I think this is an important step. Also, if you want to see from what are actually the search queries that you're ranking for, and after you do that, because one important point, as Nick said, is also that we want to rank for the right search queries. So you don't want to rank for the wrong queries, right? Because you will have people just abandoning your site, or maybe not reaching not completing the funnel. So the first step allows you to actually choose the right queries that Google already uses to rank your site, and then from there to identify the correct entities and concepts that you should put in your knowledge graph to clearly state to Google that these are the relevant queries that they want to rank for, not the other ones.
100%.
Right. And sorry, one question there is, how far down do you go? Do you go all the way down to 100th place? Because, I mean, some sites simply don't rank. So do you go into the depth of the Search Console data and pull up the keywords that we're not actually ranking for in a meaningful sense?
So right now we allow to choose a time frame, and and then you can basically sort the results just like you would do in the Google Search Console. So
okay.
And then as I showed, also there are many times you want to just bring your own search queries, so you can actually insert in the list the queries that you actually want to rank for. So you don't need eventually to scroll through that list. You can also bring your own search queries, which is also what usually people do.
Yeah, because we have imagination and understand what it is we're trying to say. Google hasn't necessarily understood it, which, I mean, I find it's quite a common problem, is I think I've said something incredibly clear and Google simply doesn't appear to have understood what it is I'm saying and how important it is for everybody out there, that even though they don't know it yet. Nick, what do you think this is going to bring to your kind of workflow with your clients?
Well, I actually want to address a question that we got in the chat by Etienne, because I think it's a common question that a lot of us get all the time, right? Okay, that's all great, like entities, yep. But what about the keywords? Now, the reason why this is so pivotal is because Google and Bing are becoming semantic search engines. And when we think about this sort of stuff, there is heavily documented in Google and Bing, actually, sorry, how intent is redefining the marketing funnel. So like when we're thinking about what kinds of content to create, we want to be able to have like a better understanding of the language that users use when they search. Just to go back to the real basics, when you're thinking about like building out your content strategy and things like that, what WordLift is really saying is like, okay, let's look at the content that we already have and let's look at how Google is understanding that content. And then from there, we can maybe go through, optimize and tweak. Like this is really those nuances that we can able to look at these things at scale and say, well, I can't do all this myself. I'm going to have this tool to be able to go through and essentially use some wonderful AI machine learning to go through and understand this and be able to build all of this. And then all I need to go through after the point is just checking and to see whether it's built that an ontology correctly in the way that I want it to be able to present to a search engine and to users as well. So when we're thinking about this stuff, I really want to stress that advantage. So just taking it back, like with content creation, that strategy that should always come from what are the goals of the business, what are the services, what is the transactional bottom line, and now let's build out and see where is the real estate of what I can be able to place on the website to be able to have as much of that conversation, own as much of that conversation as possible, and look at all the opportunities to make as much of those connections as possible. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. And I think that's super great takeaway from anyone that's just starting to get into this idea, all the way to like, all right, like I'm already there. Let's see like how we can optimize this with these fantastic tools.
Brilliant. Yeah, and you say fantastic tools. I mean, one of the things I've noticed is as soon as I install something like WordLift or another kind of system, and I think, oh, I just press the button, it's all done for me, and I can go and have a cup of tea or a sleep, or go to the beach, as you were saying earlier on, David, and look at the stars. And don't we end up in this kind of really lazy approach, is that we think, oh, the machine will do it all, I just click on a button, it's done. And the human aspect, I mean, Andrea talks about the dance between machines and humans. Can you expand on that, David?
Yeah, I don't see it that way, because what I think is that our time is limited, and we really need to focus on things that are important. And what we try to do with the AI and with our products is to remove the clutter from your day. There are repetitive tasks that you do every day that could be fully automated. And why should you, spend time copying tables from the GSC and pasting them in a spreadsheet, and then try to extract the most relevant, I don't know what, from that spreadsheet, if we can actually build something for you? Because what you really need to focus on is your content, your readers, and the connection you have with them. And the more we're able to automate these tasks and spare your time, I think the more we will succeed. So I see this as a way for you to actually improve yourself. That is to give the chance for yourself to think about what actually is important for you, what's the message you want to convey, and what's your content strategy and stuff like this.
Right, absolutely.
If I can add something to that, sorry. I think when we're thinking of this stuff, yes, this tool does, all like a lot of the heavy lifting for us, which is phenomenal. But again, like, how does machines learn? We give the input, we tell them, the rules and the parameters of what they look at. So that never really goes away. This is just to say, like, well, how can we do this better? How can we be able to fill in all of those gaps and make what we do create incredibly effective? That's really what all we're talking about at the end of the day. And using these URIs, which is the basis of this, is using this database of information to identify the entity, so that humans can be able to recognize those entities that are pulling into the SERPs and according to their characteristics, and they can be able to find that. And search engines will be able to understand this way more efficiently than we were traditionally being able to do it before. And I think that right there is the value of what we're really talking about here. So it's never to get away from, like, we will still be doing the work. It's just doing it a lot more effectively.
Brilliant. Oh, absolutely delightful point. And you mentioned humans looking at SERPs and understanding these. And I think kind of maybe something that's nice to explain is the machines are simply emulating the human brain. Is that we function in this way, is we function our understanding on entities and the relationships between them. And I talk a lot about educating the child that is Google. And what you're doing basically, David, is saying, here we have a subject that we're talking about, and it's related to that subject you've already understood, to this thing you've already understood, to that place and this person. And what we're doing and how we remember things as human beings is the more you can, the more a new piece of information I receive can hook onto things I already understand, the more likely I am to remember it and understand it. And that's the trick you're playing here. It's the memory trick. I was on a conference with a guy called, I can't remember what his name was, something International Memory Man, Chester, International Memory Man. And he explained this whole process. And it is very true. Those memory tricks are hooking, a lot of them are hooking things onto things we already know, like remembering the 52 pack of cards. It's a long story, I won't tell it all, but teaching the child that is Google, helping it understand what it is we're talking about, involves indicating to it the related entities that it has already understood, so that it will be more likely to understand and more likely to remember, in inverted commas, what we're talking about. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think it's very fair. And I mean, I think we do this every day when we try to explain things to people that we meet, and there is a little bit of neurolinguistic in play where we try to understand how to explain things to people, right? So we try to understand how these people perceive the reality and the world. And well, if you think how many people are spending time on Google searching things, we cannot pretend that we can just put out something on the web and Google will understand it, right? We need to see things the way that Google sees them. And as I showed in my presentation, there is the knowledge graph and working with data is fundamental now to teach Google something about ourselves and our content. At the end of the day, the business of Google is matching content with the people that search that content. So the more we use the Google language and the more we express in a clear manner, I always say Google. Of course, this is also something that affects anyway Bing and others, Yandex. So, but I mean, for the sake of clarity, we can say always Google. But so the more we tune our strategy to use the language that Google understands, the more we're sure that we can actually get higher ranking for the search queries that are relevant to our content. I think this is also fundamental, that we don't want to rank for a query that's not relevant for us. So it's not only a matter of ranking higher in any circumstance. It's a matter of ranking higher for the queries that are really relevant to our content. We want the right people to come find us, and so we need to speak Google's language so that Google can understand us better and show us when people are looking for something that's really related to us. At the end, this is what Google is doing. We use Google because most of the time we get the relevant content.
Right. Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, one of the biggest problems is the boss wanting to rank for straight away the shorthead terms. I have a client called UBG. Immediately, I want to rank for eSIM. And they don't understand that eSIM isn't necessarily the best query to rank for. Something like installing an eSIM or getting a data plan for an eSIM is going to be much more effective in terms of actually driving sales. I mean, you work with real clients all the time, Nick, don't you? Do you have this problem a lot?
Oh, I like to think that if I ever say anything that I've either lived it, tested it, experienced it, or kind of like been up with it at 3 a.m. trying to like figure it out. Like that's how I like to learn and how I like to do things. I think a lot of the time we want to be able to present a good overview of what we're going to need, and when it comes to the clients, a lot of the time they are it's like an educational learning curve, right? For a lot of the time, nobody really understands search engines, and particularly when it comes to the optimization of those, what is actually there and what is actually required. And I think one of the things I really, really loved is, just simplifying into like that 5 stars linked data. On the web, machine readable, non-proprietary formats, RDF standards, and linked RDFs. To put kind of maybe in maybe layman's terms, or at least how I've organized it in my brain, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's kind of like make sure the site's crawlable, make sure the site is indexable, make sure that the content renders for search, so that you can actually see what is on that page, make sure that it shows the relationships of that content using schema, and make sure that it is in an information architecture, so just from a user standpoint, that it is super able to be able to find stuff. So no orphan pages, no tons of click depth, that kind of just frustrates users and kind of just eats up your crawl budget, and no one can find anything that is super important to your bottom line. So I think, just simplifying all of those things is a really, really great way to kind of just break it down and just think, how do we simply just look at these really complex problems, break it down and think, okay, this is what we can do. We're going to be able to do the SEO the way that we know how. But now we're thinking a little bit more grander on a bigger picture scale. How do we be able to do this more effectively? And I think when we're talking about the optimization part, this is a really, really great, effective way that we can be able to chip away and present information in a much more meaningful way.
Brilliant.
And I think
Great
if
answer.
you tell that to clients, that's good. I think the challenges that I've found are maybe like, their own teams, like looking at those URIs and being like, well, it just doesn't seem relevant. Like, I don't understand, these pictures, these, pieces of information are not super relevant. And my feedback to them is, this is not me doing this. This is actually a representation of the information and the kind of scatter shot. Because if you go in super broad, you're going to get super broad results, right? So this is almost like a way to be able to have like a bit of a litmus test and say, like, well, when I'm talking about this content, is it actually serving the search intent in a meaningful way? And with that particular client, it is a bit of still a discovery from them. And I kind of identified that early on, we're going to have to go right back to the woodwork and do content training, heading structure training, search intent training, and then also look at the broader picture, which is their UX and how many clicks it actually takes to get to those important key pages, because their conversion rates were just absolutely phenomenally awful. So again, these are really, really great ways you can be able to, again, assess what is actually happening on their sites and the kinds of challenges and how to sort of go about doing these discoverable moments, doing these educational pieces and working them back before, and being able to say, like, this is the litmus of how search engines really, from this, from semantic relationships, what it's placing you in with all of these different entities, from what it's understood from the URIs that it pulls out.
Right. I mean, I would suggest that perhaps that last part is going to be a bit too off the wall, as it were, for most company bosses. One of the things you said there,
challenges.
Yeah, sure. But what you said there was there's a disconnect. And if you say to them, oh, here, we've put this schema marker in place, nobody can see it, but it's incredibly important. There's a disconnect for them compared to saying we're going to change the headings, which they can see. How do you deal with that, David?
In explaining or...
Well, I mean, convincing somebody who doesn't see the schema markup, who doesn't understand knowledge graphs, who doesn't really understand search. You're saying, we're doing all this, it's costing you a lot of money, or costing you money, or costing you time. How do you convince somebody who doesn't, it's too disconnected for them from what they're actually seeing?
There is a double approach, actually. So the first approach, which is, I think, the most important, is that you need to ask for some time to show results. And so usually what we do in our, when we apply WordLift, is that we create two similar groups of contents where we can apply the markup, and another one where we do not touch anything. And then we compare the traffic of these pages, of these groups, after 2 or 3 weeks. And we can see, I have some cases that are documented on our website, wordlift.io, where you can see that after 3 weeks, we can also get a 30% increase of a number of clicks, not impressions, clicks. So I think this is the first approach. Give me 2 or 3 weeks, and I'll show you that we can get the results. The other approach is actually to work on the front end, to show that actually you're doing something also on the front end, which is also useful, because the knowledge graph is not only something that you use with Google, but it's also something that you can use to actually connect content on your website, which is also very important. Because if you're talking about some content about some entities, there is a beautiful website that's using WordLift since years. It's called freeorg.org. And it's talking about arts, places, pictures, photography. And they made a very nice work there by connecting they created a huge knowledge graph. And by connecting the articles using the knowledge graph, they have faceted search widgets, related article widgets. And so the other thing is, actually, you can also work on the front end by using the knowledge graph, by creating automatic connections between contents. And these also increase, at the end of the day, increases the traffic, because people that are interested in some content, they actually may follow a trail of related content by using these entities as the connection point. So these are mostly the two approaches.
No, I mean, one is to hit the bottom line, and the other is to give them something they can actually see and perceive, which is a brilliant approach. I'm suddenly very convinced that I should be looking more into this. And to kind of the last big question is, you talk about the knowledge graph of a website being its backbone. Can you expand on that? And then Nick, you pop in after David's explained what he means. The knowledge graph of your website is its backbone. What do you mean?
Yeah, what I mean is that you need to clearly identify what is your your concept, the concept that you use as a reference for your own content, right? So as we said, we need to clearly state to Google what is our knowledge about, what we're talking about. And if we only use words and we not define our universe, it's very hard to do that. It's very hard to be coherent. And so when you create your knowledge graph, and as I said, it's hard. It's not like, if I ask a person that has a website, and ask them what are the relevant entities for your website, what are the relevant concepts, many people actually do not know from where to start. So it's really hard. So it's not only it's not something that comes eventually easy. It's something that it's a sort of almost a therapeutic session where you actually try to understand more about yourself. But once you get to know yourself, once you understand what are the system of concepts that you usually talk about in your content and what's your aim, then you start to make sense of your own content, and then you can actually grow on that. You will find connections and things that you didn't think before. So that's why I said it's a backbone, because it's like the inner soul. It's something like it's a way for you to define who you are, what you're talking about. This will help you being more coherent in the content that you wrote and that you write and you're going to write. So it's like a system of it's like the cardinal points that will help direct yourself into writing better content and clearly be expert about your own content and your own knowledge. I hope I managed to explain that.
No, that was really, really clear. I mean, what struck me is that with brand SERPs, I'm saying to people, you need to make sure that Google's communicating to your audience who you are, what you do, and who your audience is, and why you might be useful to them. And in fact, what you've just said is most people don't even know that about themselves, let alone be able to then communicate it to Google. So this is a really good exercise to figure that out. And then you can start building a brand SERP and come to Kalicube. So Nick, what have you got to add to all of that?
If you've ever Googled a query and received a useful answer without having to make another click, you have the Google Knowledge Graph to thank for. If you kind of like think about it from that standpoint, like it isn't using this enormous database, it's basically the understanding of you and the relationship to all of the content and all of the information that it understands around what you're trying to represent online, right? So taking it back to like those simple concepts, this is a really, really useful way of being able to figure out, okay, where am I at the moment? So I think when I think about knowledge graphs, like I start from there and kind of work backwards. All right, never to take away from a really, really good, succinct content strategy. Again, going back to the fact that like Google and Bing are becoming semantic search engines. I am repeating myself because I think it's super important to really understand these concepts, is that the intent is redefining the marketing funnel, and how Google wants to represent information is really just along like that traditional marketing thing that you guys learn at university or even in some advanced high schools around the purchase funnel. I discover something, I want to learn a little bit more about it, then I might want to, do some comparisons. And then I might want to be like, okay, I picked a brand and like, maybe whereabouts is it? Or I just go straight to like the transaction of I'm wanting to interact in some meaningful way with this website for whatever it is that they're wanting to procure for people. So with all of those different stages, always start from that understanding, go through, create that content and be able to link it in a meaningful way with related search results, internal links, make sure that that's all there. And with anything that is like extra, information around that, again, like, we've just saw that wonderful array of same as, that same as schema. Same as is like, source of URIs for entity that shows that those relationships to the thing. That is a really, really good way of just kind of like, look at your objectively your site and try and figure out, okay, if I were to ask the who, what, when, why, how much of that conversation am I owning? For like maybe like a key product or a key service that I'm wanting to provide. Start there, go through that process. If you've done it really, really well, but you're still not going through and moving the needle, then something like WordLift is actually a really, really good way of uncovering a lot of the mystery around why. And that's the beauty of what we can be able to look at here, because it will show you those relevant keystones that it is all pulling into that, and you're able to basically reverse engineer. And I've seen the work that you've done, Jason, with even just your own personal brand, like all these different entities, and being able to present information in a way that really just spoon feeds to search like, hey, this is me and this is who I am and this is what I want to represent. And you can sort of start to see, as you're feeding it more information and building upon that, you're now starting to kind of like have the search engine work for you a little bit now, because you really understood like these mechanisms. And that's kind of where we can be able to get to that point. Start from the content strategy, build out like that IA, build those connections within your website. Wow. And then be able to go through and then be able to refine that. This is really what we're talking about. And with the add-on and with WordLift as a tool, it is just so fascinating to see what is actually presented from the database around its understanding of the content that we put in a lot of time and energy to create. If you're going to put in that time and energy to create it, why not go through and refine it and be able to just make it a lot more effective? I think that's a core message of that from
Brilliant.
me.
Oh, can you just do one thing for me, Nick? Can you say why, what, we, what, whatever it was you said? Because you say it so quickly and so impressively. Please just do it again. The what, why, who, where, what?
What, why, who, where, when, which.
Right, yeah, you said it so quickly in the middle of your sentence, and now you can't even remember. That's delightful. But you mentioned my brand SERP, and actually something that's appeared recently is that when you search Jason Barnard, it now says, who is the brand SERP guy, which is brilliant, and what is a brand SERP, which are the two people also ask. And what I like about that is I've educated Google to the fact that the brand SERP guy is a synonym for my name, but also I've educated about a concept that did not exist 2 or 3 years ago. And so I've created a totally new concept and put it into Google's brain before most of the rest of the world has even noticed it, which 100%. Is kind of fun because it gives me this unique experiment platform, cauldron thing to do magic in. And it's actually a lot of fun because there isn't any preconceived ideas around it. I'm actually able to educate Google about something that it could not possibly know before, and therefore create a new reality on that particular little corner of the world. Anyway, that was my wonderful comment. Thank you very much, everybody. David, have you got any last comments before we wrap up?
Well, no, just please remember, everyone, we need to create, as Tim Berners-Lee said, I always put Tim Berners-Lee in my presentations anyway. You need to put your data on the web. There is so much unlocked potential, and we're going to see that more and more.
Brilliant, simple and effective. Nick, last comments from you?
Google and Bing are becoming semantic search engines, and as we have only heard a proliferation about on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and anyone that has the finger on the pulse, we are learning about expertise, authority, and trust with Google EAT. A lot of this is really building from the building blocks of how they are organizing information around the web, and what a wonderful way that we can be able to look at this and be able to say, well, there is an IAML. I'm using those words interchangeably, I know that, but there is a really, really great way we can be able to automate some of this stuff that would be able to help us to be able to really focus in on the O part of SEO, optimization. And that is such a wonderful opportunity we can be able to use with WordLift.
Absolutely wonderful. And one thing you said there was EAT.
I'm not sponsored.
No. But one thing you said there is about EAT, and we'll close with this, is once again, Google acting like a human being in its understanding of the world, but also, does it think somebody or a company is expert? Is it authoritative? Is it trustworthy? Like a human being, in order to give you my business or in order to interact with you, I need to trust you and I need to think you're expert and authoritative and that you can actually help me. And I need to understand who you are, what you do, and who your audience is. So thank you very much for everybody for watching. Thank you, Alessia, who we saw a couple of times pop up on screen. Thank you, David. That was an absolutely brilliant presentation. I'm looking forward to becoming the real VIP WordLift partner and getting my hands on the plug-in, excuse me. Thank you, Nick, for joining us all the way from Australia. Our Oz special this morning, too early for me, too late for Nick, and right smack bang in the middle of the day for David. So David's a happy man.
Good for me, yes.
I'm just happy that it's not 1 a.m. or 2 a.m.
Okay, right, brilliant. And thank you, Anton, for the behind the scenes and reminders about the song. A quick goodbye to end the show. Thank you, Nick and David. It was a lot of fun.
Subscribe, and click the notification bell. Boom.
You're good at this, Nick.
You.
Oh, yeah, Kalicube monthly. Oh, join us next month, next Tuesday, second Tuesday of the month in March for the Kalicube